program to offer services for would-be refugees covered 16,000 people back in 2016, and it cost the taxpayers $60 million a year. It now covers more than 600,000 people and costs more than $1 billion annually. It's one of many signs that we can point to of a broken immigration system in Canada. Hello and welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. I'm Brian Lilly, your host. The immigration system in Canada is cracking on so many fronts. Permanent residents, foreign students, temporary workers, foreign workers program, and yes, asylum or refugee system as well. A second report this year from the Parliamentary Budget Office shows just how bad things have become. 79% of people on this program, called the Interim Federal Health Program, well, they came to Canada on another form of visa, such as student or work visa, and then declared asylum once they were here. 74,000 people who are on this program who have been denied their claims and ordered deported, and yet they're still here collecting benefits of a program that, well, gives people on it better health coverage than you would get from your provincial program if you were a Canadian citizen. All of this cost you. All of this undermines faith and support in our system. How did we get it so bad? How did we lose track? And can we fix it? Richard Kurland joins me now to talk about this. He is a lawyer and policy advocate who works in the immigration field. Richard, great to talk to you again. I'm sure that you went over this PBO report and were just rolling your eyes. Did the numbers shock you, or did you just look and say, yeah, that checks out with what I've been seeing?
Oh, no shock. It's actually worse. The trend is for more of that. And no surprise, no shock, because I've been watching Ottawa for literally decades. This is the classic mind my own silo, forget about the big picture deal.
What do you mean by that?
So if you go pinching pennies, for example, at the Immigration Refugee Board, not resourcing the tribunal to process a lot of cases faster, guess what happens? Giant ballooning inventory. And we went from about 7 months, 8 months to 4 years before you see an oral hearing at the Refugee Board. What did that do? Hello, not rocket science. It attracted more people to come.
I would say that there's been a bit of mismanagement on how this program operates. And we'll get into the wider immigration system in a moment. But there was a decision made back in 2016 to change the Interim Federal Health Program. Now, I broke the story in the Toronto Sun. It would have been around 2010, 2011, that saw the Harper government look and say, wait a minute, this program offers better health services than what Canadians get from their provincial programs. And they decided to change the program and say, you know what? It should match provincial programs. It should match what Canadians get from their health services. Instead, I mean, this service now offers you eye care, ophthalmology. It offers you physiotherapy, and it offers you home care visits and things that the rest of us do have to pay out some pocket. Now, the Carney government's looking to alter this a bit, but that will only slow the growth of the program. So the Harper government changed this. The Liberals and doctors' activist group said if people only get what Canadians get in their program, then these refugee claimants will die. And they protested it for years. 2016, the Trudeau government not only put the program back up to the gold-plated plan, but then, of course, 2017 comes around and Justin Trudeau puts out his infamous tweet, "We welcome the world," and our asylum system went crazy. I think those two things have put us on this path, combined with bad management, have put us on this path where we went from a $60 million program covering 16,000 people to a $1 billion program covering 600,000. And as you say, it's now 4 years to get a hearing. And that's just the start of the process, isn't it? The hearing?
Yeah, that's it. That's day one, square one.
So you're in the country 4 years, and that's the start of it. How long does the process last?
Well, we're going to find out, and 7 years would not be unusual, excluding the removal process. So a decade or longer makes sense to me. But you left one important piece off the puzzle, which is Justin Trudeau's office, the PMO. About 4 years ago, 5 years ago, somehow they took a secret decision, which is now public, to increase Canada's population size to 100 million. And they couldn't use the permanent resident system to do it because every year that immigration minister reports to Parliament next year's permanent resident numbers. Politically, a non-starter. Instead, they added literally an extra 2 million temporary status people inside of 18, 20 months. Well, guess what? When you add that many people and they don't want to go home, what are they going to start to do? Refugee claims.
You believe that the increase in temporary residency, foreign students, temporary foreign workers, etc., that was part of what is widely discussed as the Century Initiative, the idea to move us up to 100 million people.
Well, that's how they were going to deliver it. So I was getting monthly production numbers out of our visa offices overseas. I had no news of this, and I'm watching these numbers spike, spike, spike. No corresponding resourcing our visa offices, so processing times got out of hand there. And what the heck is going on? And then federal courts started to see a huge intake in cases. The entire system was aware, but they did the mea culpa after they floated their solution of giving, wait for it, amnesty to everyone because it would cure the chicken and the python problem they had. At the same time, they pushed forward to their 100 million goal. Well, they've apologized. They said, we made a mistake. They're making decisions now to reduce intake of foreign workers, foreign students, even visitors, to bring the levels back to normal. But meanwhile, we're stuck with the bill.
For people that don't know, Richard runs a service that tracks an awful lot of government decisions on the immigration file and sends out a monthly summary of it called Lexbase. And a lot of this is found in there. I've used your service for years, Richard. To give folks an example, in the Harper years, it would be common to have a few hundred people from India who would claim asylum on an annual basis. So 2013, 2014, you might see 200-300 people come in, they're on a visa and they declare asylum. In 2024, we had 32,563 Indian nationals declare asylum in Canada. And there's a 44,000 asylum claims backlog for India, or there was at the end of 2025. We were having similar numbers, not quite. I think it's about 25,000 Mexican nationals declare asylum until they put the visa requirement back in for visitors from Mexico. And it's, so that's caused some of that. Did we just incentivize people to come here and declare asylum?
Of course. It's pure common sense. Some of these people literally bet the farm on a future in Canada. The parents sell the farm, allowing the kid to come to Canada, pay foreign student fees, and get onto a path for PR. But when that path is not available, the foreign student is going to go to the airport tarmac with an empty wallet, a broken heart, and a flight of shame back home. Instead, they opt to remain on the possibility of obtaining refugee status. And as I said quite publicly, before it began to happen, you're going to see those Indian nationals in colleges and universities suddenly get the bug for domestic politics back home. They're going to start supporting these separatist groups, independence groups in India, and concoct effectively a refugee claim. And so that's what happened. Some cases, of course, got to be true, but the numbers demonstrate that this is a claim of opportunity.
That's it. It's the numbers. I'm not doubting that there are some people, especially if you're involved in Khalistani politics, which is the separatist movement in the Punjab region of India, that you may face problems back home. but 32,563 in 1 year from an ally, a trading partner, a fellow democracy seems a bit high to me.
Well, it is. And I proposed, when the government did not listen, what I had proposed during the Harper era, when we witnessed in Canada an influx of refugee claims from Western Europe, Hungary, Romania, citizens who had the legal right there to live and work in adjacent countries. Instead, they were taking planes to Canada to make refugee claims. Solution? Give them business class treatment. Put them at the front of the processing queue so that they're done in 4 months. You remove the incentive, and that's what the Harper regime did. The numbers went down, problem over. And that's what we have to look at again today.
I remember when Jason Kenney, who was then immigration minister, flew to Hungary to. We had an influx of people that we were told we had to call Roma. Colloquially, people would say they were gypsies, but we had to call them Roma because gypsy is a pejorative term. You can't use it. But who did Jason Kenney have to go see? A guy whose literal title is the Gypsy King. And he had to negotiate with him and talk to him about the fact that, look, you can't have all these people coming to Canada. What can you do on your end? Hungary, by the way, was, I'm just bringing up the numbers now, they were going up again. Now it's down to a couple hundred a year. 2025, we dropped to 17,000 from India as we try to impose some changes. Mexico, as I said, had been 25,000. Now it's about 5,000. You know, there you have to have these processes in place, and yet often, Richard, I talk to people, and in particular, this is a problem that I have with liberals. Is that they don't seem to get that people will game the system. They seem to believe that everyone, especially, it's touching on immigration. I mean, these people are the salt of the earth. This is good. This is pure. I come from an immigrant background, immigrant family. The fact that you're an immigrant doesn't mean that you are automatically good. People are going to game the system, and it seems like some folks just don't want to understand that. And so we put in place a system that incentivizes you to lie, to game, to cheat, and then we're shocked when people do.
Yeah, and that's for one simple reason. What is more important than taxpayer money to the federal liberals in Ottawa? Votes. And if you can squander bucks and capture marginal swing constituencies in 416-905, it's worth the price. Of course, you're not paying the bill. That's for the taxpayers. But you'll do what's necessary to get those votes. And in the context of minority government, lying in bed with the sweetheart federal NDP, that was the logical outcome of that political arrangement. Never mind how much it costs. We want votes. We're going to sacrifice on the altar some common sense. We should not be surprised when the numbers balloon. And $1 billion in taxpayer money goes out the window.
I have to ask you, are we able, I don't know if it's international law, Canadian law, policy, are our officials able to just say, no, you're not a refugee. You can't claim asylum. I'm looking at the stats here, and we've got 634 people from the United States claimed asylum last year. None from the United Kingdom, but in the past, we've had people show up from the United Kingdom and claim asylum. Can't we just look at them and say, you've got to be joking, get back?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. And the thing is that I think I even intercepted a memo from our frontline guys at the Canadian border requesting permission to ask the hard questions because they didn't believe a word. And the answer came down from the higher-ups, that's for the refugee hearing. Well, what refugee hearing in 4 years? And here's the other thing they started to do, not even provide refugee hearings, because they would make a paper-based decision. And then it got out that these refugee claims at the border were being concocted with AI. So a paper thing goes in. You don't get an oral hearing to test. The border guys are told to back off and wait for the hearing, and there's no
So,
hearing. That was our system.
and by the way, I just pulled it up. France, 57 French nationals declared asylum in 2025. You're fleeing Macron. You're fleeing croissants. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. These are not foreign. By the way, the way that it is documented by the Canadian government, these are not people who are fleeing war and transit to us through France or the United States. This is their citizenship. And we are giving legitimacy to the idea that we have to take refugees from France. So, just to go back on that, the border guards were told not to ask questions. Why?
In writing, by the way. So the why is that's not your role. Your role is just process them. The role of the IRB is to do the questioning. Even though our border guys have the experience, decades of experience, the knowledge, and have human radar like no one else to separate wheat from chaff.
We have all sweated in front of CBSA officers from time to time. I mean, not that I'm doing anything wrong when I'm coming back into Canada, but they get the training to look at you, to grill you, to ask you questions that, I mean, it is a skill set. And you're not going to get that with some guy sitting in an office that never sees you. So they're told not to ask the questions. And then we move to a non-hearing system. How prevalent is that, the non-hearing asylum hearing?
Well, we're waiting to see. And the one I'm keeping an eye on is the quote unquote Gaza program. So individuals from Hamas governed areas in the Middle East are being allowed into Canada with temporary status, visitor. And then, surprise, surprise, they're going to be making these refugee claims. To save money, government's going, oh, well, they must be refugees. And they
because they're
sidestep.
Palestinians, the United Nations already considers them refugees.
Yeah, that's good.
Even though they've been living in the same place for decades and it's intergenerational, they're refugees. I mean, I may as well declare myself a refugee at this point. My Irish ancestors were driven out.
Yep. And it's fortunately, I'm glad the family made it out. We benefited in the long term. And that's the thing. Security is priority one. Compassion is priority two. And part of our broken refugee determination system is giving compassion over security. That's a big no-no. And we're going to pay for it in the long run as you witness problems that are coming from outside Canada taking root inside Canada from all over the world.
I haven't seen any of that outside of a Montreal Canadiens game recently. People that don't know, Montreal for Palestine hanging a effigy of a Jewish man wearing a kippah while chanting "Go Habs Go." It's disturbing as can be. Richard, look, after the break, I want to move on to stuff outside of that. But you mentioned compassion and the idea of the interim federal health program is about compassion, but it's also about practicalities. Until you are processed and declared a refugee or have your claim accepted, you can't go on a provincial or territorial program. And so that's why the federal government has this. And I accept that. And that is fine. As I said, though, a decade ago, it was 16,000 people and it cost $60 million. Now it's more than 600,000 and it costs $1 billion. I want to go back to one of the stats that was in the PBO report that just came out. Well, two of them. That 79% of the people on this program who came to Canada arrived on another form of visa, such as student or work visa. And then that 74,000 people on this program have already had their claim denied and been ordered deported. At what point do we just cut things off and say, look, I'm sorry, this doesn't work out? I have no compassion for people that are lying to me and our country. But by comparison, people who are resettled refugees spend 3 months in this program. The people that I just mentioned are spending 4 years and up on this program. We are being abused by people who are economic migrants, and I get it. As I said, my parents were economic migrants. We Tons of people want to come to Canada, but you are abusing a system that is there to help the most vulnerable, and you're being allowed to do it. Like, are we just dupes in this system?
Well, Trudeau the elder said, "What's a billion?" And so, you know, a billion a year for that health deal, instead of spending a billion this year, next, and next, I don't know. Why don't you take an extra 100 million, 150 million from that billion, give it to the Refugee Determination Board to reduce a 4-year pipeline into a 9-month pipeline? That billion shrinks because you're not carrying the inventory.
Did we cut the IRB budget at some point or do something that made this a longer process, or is it just volume?
It's it's Justin Trudeau's 100 million person plan. It's volume, volume, volume with no corresponding increase in resources. It's as simple as that. It was that secret decision, not a public decision made by the advisors. That's the root problem. They took a gold medal system where we used the human capital model, which was the envy of the Western world, even to be adopted by President Trump's crew, and threw it out the window for political interest, short-term temporary foreign workers in, the businesses, and allowing large numbers of foreign students to come in to subsidize the college university carrying costs for their provincial education systems. They just forgot what's going to happen when you tell 2 million extra people to come on down, but now you can't stay here. These people are going to look for options because they're human, and we're Canada, one of the best places on the planet. Of course they're going to want to stay. And if they don't qualify the regular way, they're going to look for other options.
The One of the most recent dispatches from your Lexbase missives was about how we have started a transgender pilot program to bring in people from other countries who are transgendered and are experiencing persecution. Now, I live just a couple blocks from Toronto's gay village. It is incredibly ethnically diverse. You walk down Church Street, and it is unbelievably diverse, and you see men of all, it's mostly men of all races and backgrounds walking down the street holding hands, and you think, wow, I bet you were persecuted in your home country. And so that is a real thing. And I am sure it's the same in the transgender community. But we know from experience that declaring that you were gay was abused for getting in as a refugee. And speaking to a politician a little while ago who was talking to someone who had claimed asylum, and they were part of a work program, and they had said, early in the conversation with the politician, oh, yes, well, I came to Canada because I'm gay. I don't want to be persecuted. And then the person got more comfortable talking to the politician and eventually said, and soon I'm going to bring my wife and children with me.
Yeah. Yep.
And of course, we've also had people arrive at the border and say, I'm here because I'm gay, and their wife and 5 kids are behind them. We allowed that. Have you seen any signs that there's going to be guardrails on this so that it's not just abused? Because, I mean, the number of people declaring themselves gay to become asylum seekers in Canada might be bigger than the gay population of Canada.
Well, there's that. And the two sources for guardrails, you got Fox TV waiting for the story to break there, and you got President Trump's crew.
What do you
It's
mean?
low-hanging fruit for him.
Like they will be upset at this, or
Bingo.
yeah?
Those Canadians, the liberals, these leftists, these extremists, this is what they're doing up there. So that's no good. We have to control it. Now we have to be more vigilant of Canadians seeking entry to the United States It's not going to be good.
But so basically, there are no guardrails on this pilot program. It's look,
Tested in Bogota. Once it's a pilot project, and if it gets any media attraction, they're going to expand this to other needed areas, so to speak.
as I said, I understand that there are people persecuted. It's just going to become another way for people to abuse the system, and because those CBSA officers will be told, "Don't ask any questions."
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, it's, our obligations are to the people physically present in Canada. Even if we would like to save the world, we don't have an obligation to scout the planet for deserving refugee cases. We have a sufficient number. The volumes are good for those who manage that Darwinian don't come to Canada maze, find themselves here. We process them and we meet our international obligations. We don't get more meeting international obligations by hunting and searching for would-be refugees. That's not how our system should work. You're going to end up with a resentful Canadian domestic population instead of the segment of the population that cries because we opened our hearts, the welcome mat out to deserving people in need of protection because of their fear of persecution. And it's the credibility of that system which is being washed out by, I don't know, some people with a different political agenda.
All right, we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we will discuss the fact that judges are helping to undermine the faith in the immigration system by giving lighter sentences based on people's immigration status. Back in moments.
There were so many missed opportunities to catch this before the devastating thing happened.
A third of them we found literally in the phone book. These people were not afraid. They knew that nobody was effectively hunting them. They knew they had escaped justice, that they were going to die in their beds.
When I give talks at law schools, is that the charter ultimately is empowering a minority, and it's empowering a minority that's a guild across the country, and it's a fairly elite guild, and the guild is lawyers.
Families who were split by referendum and brothers and sisters who never talked to each other for years after the referendum because they were so angry at each other because of emotions on both sides.
The reason he was assassinated was not because he was trying to put a satellite into space, but because the gun that he was creating had other applications that made him and the gun very dangerous.
It's finally here. A new season of Canada Did What? Host Media podcast that revisits the big Canadian political events you might think you remember and tells you the real story you never knew. I'm Tristan Hopper. The voices you just heard are from our brand new Season 2. We will unpack some of the pivotal moments that helped define our country, often without a vote, usually without a plan, and sometimes without anyone admitting what they'd done. We'll find out how Canada became a welcoming paradise for untold numbers of Nazi war criminals after the Second World War. We let them build monuments to their wartime exploits and even ended up honoring a Nazi fighter in the House of Commons. And I'm sorry to say that none of that happened by accident. We'll bring you the little-known story of a troubled Canadian rocket scientist who turned to a sinister life of selling giant guns to terrible people. And if that sounds like a spy novel, it ends like one too. You'll hear the behind-the-scenes story of Quebec's attempted secession from Canada and how very close we came to a political crisis that would have made Brexit look like a picnic. You'll hear about how the much-celebrated Charter of Rights and Freedoms turned into something its creators never wanted, and how many of the most extravagant warnings about the document were all quickly proven true. And you'll even hear about how authorities bungled multiple chances to stop the deadliest terrorist attack in our country's history, and then proceeded to pretend it never happened. These aren't dusty history lessons. They're stories about power, ambition, madness, and the things about Canada that a lot of people would rather ignore. But not you. You won't want to miss an episode. Subscribe to make sure you get all of Season 2 starting March 2026, anywhere you get your podcasts.
So, above and beyond the fact that the asylum system is broken, the overall immigration system is broken, we were moving towards 500,000 permanent residents a year. And now the Carney Liberals have said, well, we're going to take it back. We're cutting things dramatically. I think the number, Richard, is about what, 380,000 this year? That's still well above historical norms, is it not?
Yeah, basically it's within the range, but these are people already in Canada. Gone are the days where you applied from outside, you waited outside until you got your permanent resident visa, and then you come look for your apartment and your job. Now the integration and selection is for people already here, already working, already studying, so that it's seamless. It costs less to do it.
In some ways, I understand that. Like, that was part of the Canadian Experience program.
Yeah.
Okay, you've done advanced skills training, advanced degree program work in Canada. You're already here. You understand Canada. Okay, that kind of makes sense. But doesn't that leave an awful lot of people on the waiting list on the outside who, like my parents, applied? I remember asking my mother, I think it took her 4 months between applying and moving here back in 1968. Yes.
Yep. And my folks came that way as well, and it did take very little time. Things changed. The planet grew, the economies intermingled, technology, capital, and people were able to have greater mobility. And that meant that things that took a very little time in the past needed a lot of time because many more people were interested. So it's all about the number of temporary status people, not the number of permanent residents. That's a constant. All that happens is that the Band-Aid on the forehead gets ripped off that said temporary status, and a new Band-Aid goes on that says permanent resident. But your neighbor could be here 8 years with temporary status. You'll never know it, but they're here. That's the point. And that number of people here kept growing and growing and growing. That was the root cause.
Well, let me read to you some numbers. So there's been several polling firms or groups that have tracked this over the years. Environics, since the 1970s, has been asking, are there too many people? Just about right? Not enough. Before 2023, so between 2016 and 2022, it's about a quarter. In 2022, about 27% said, yeah, there's too much immigration. 2023, middle of this big rise that you were talking about, 44%, there's too much. 2024, 58% said there's too much. And by 2025, 56%. That's more than double prior to the big sweep. Immigration and Refugees and Citizenship Canada runs a similar survey. They would get the same numbers, about 15 to 28% saying too many prior to 2022. Then their tracking said 35% said too many in 2023. And in November 2024, 54% said too many. Angus Reid, similar numbers. If you and I have talked for a long time about these issues. If I had told you 10 years ago, the Liberals are going to break the immigration system and people are going to become anti-immigrant in Canada, you would have laughed at me, wouldn't you?
Well, never at you, but I get the point. If I had to unpack it just follow the loose hanging thread back to Justin. When he brought in 2 million extra people, they didn't think it through. Tell me, where are 2 million extra people gonna live? It means they're chasing the same housing supply in the same unaffordable areas of urban Canada. Rents for Canadians go up. It means the foreign students, the huge increase that are allowed to work off campus, are competing with are young Canadians and permanent residents for the same entry-level jobs. Who gets hit? The Canadians and permanent residents for affordable housing and for work. And so, surprise, the numbers in polling reflect that maybe immigration's not working out for us.
Well, to quote Steve McKinnon, the Liberal House leader, why are conservatives against providing health care to some of the most vulnerable people on the earth? That's what he said in response to the PBO report, and that's the kind of response that they get when you ask. They denied for the longest time that the rise in rents had anything to do with adding in those 2 million people. But if you're not adding housing stock, and we haven't been, housing stock, Pierre Poilievre had a great point about this. In, I believe it was 2024, we added about as many houses as we did in 1971 when we had a fraction of the population. Where are they going to live? Well, you end up with things like 9 people to a 2-bedroom home, a 2-bedroom apartment. It's unbelievable conditions, and I don't think that's what the people living in those conditions came to Canada for.
No, they did not. And the thing is that they could have, sorry, Brian, they could have shared. They could have shared the information with something called CMHC or the private sector housing industry to say, oh, by the way, heads up, we're bringing in an extra 2 million units. Why don't you start your marketing and construction today?
Yeah, it is unreal what they've done, and yet it took until April 2024 for Trudeau to finally say, we're bringing in people faster than we can absorb them. But then he didn't do anything. I will grant Carney this. They have pulled back a bit. I don't think enough. I don't think the numbers are in balance. You mentioned Trudeau the Elder earlier. Pierre Trudeau used to raise and lower the immigration numbers based on things like, unemployment.
Yeah.
We've got about 14 to 15% youth unemployment in Ontario and Alberta. Might be a bit better where you are in British Columbia, but it's still double digits across the country.
Yeah. That's the generation that is paying the price for poor decision-making by Justin Trudeau. I'm being blunt, but that's it. And for the first time, we're seeing polling that younger generation that got caught in the teeth of the politics of Justin Trudeau are going conservative.
And I'll tell you that it's also like we got I mentioned the polling that said there are too many people coming. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're anti-immigrant or racist. That's, likely just means that you're noticing reality. We're bringing in too many people. But there is an increasing anti-immigrant and racist sentiment growing. And I was speaking to a friend who's quite public, who Indian heritage, born and raised in Canada, loves this country like no other, defends this country and Western civilization like no other, and yet has told me he is repeatedly getting now, Indian, go home. That's heartbreaking. It's not the only form of racism that we're seeing out there, but this is the result of people being bad managers and having bad policy. This was not happening to him 5-10 years ago.
That's it. And it's exacerbated by the commuter runs in Ontario in the evenings because of the newfound talent that engages in public demonstrations, blocking highways, all sorts of facilities. That never happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You didn't have these demos about problems outside Canada gumming up your ride home.
No.
So that's another irritant.
You might have those protests, but they didn't mess with the commute. If it doesn't mess with my commute, I'm
there you go.
less inclined to complain. Let me ask you about the temporary foreign workers program. Tim Hortons, they have received an awful lot of vitriol over this. I'm sure you've seen online what they have been called. St. Hortons is one of the regular nicknames that they've had because they've really used the temporary foreign workers program. Not to pick on them, but they are one of, if not Canada's largest fast food restaurants. They're not alone in this. I mean, A&W franchises in Baie-Comeau, Quebec said, "Oh, if we can't bring in foreign workers, we couldn't possibly serve burgers in Baie-Comeau." And so we've had an abuse of this, and now perhaps simply because of Dunkin' Donuts announcing that they're going to come back into the Canadian market, Tim Hortons is saying, "Oh, we're going to back off the temporary foreign workers program, and we're going to hire 10,000 locals." Was this a planned abuse? Was this part of the 2 million secret plan that you're talking about? Was this big business in Canada just being able to bend government's ear and say, "Look, we need cheaper workers. These kids won't work hard enough for us. We don't want to pay them that much"?
Well, you know, we have supply and demand. What's wrong with paying an extra $1 an hour to young people to take entry-level jobs until you get your supply adjusted? The ease and facilitated entry of foreign workers for entry-level jobs, it's more than Timmy's. It cuts across a lot of industries. But what I track is something a little different. I track the political donations made by the companies that bring in significant numbers of foreign
they're
workers.
Not allowed to.
Well, I don't know if they're not allowed to, because it's been happening. And even at the level of I shouldn't say all, the Conservatives and the Liberals, not so much NDP. But I followed very carefully the leadership structure administratively within those parties, and I looked for connections between the senior political managers and those companies. The one that went on record, I think your colleague Tom Godfrey did it a long time ago, Judy Scrow. A long time ago, I think it was she had a family member that was very senior in the Conservative Party. If it might be mixing them up.
Judy Scrow would be the Liberals, yeah.
Liberal one. And that's how suddenly there were these pools of foreign workers that I had never seen before taking entry-level jobs in Canada. So you got to watch those political donations, because at the end of the day, the decision to allow into Canada entry-level foreign workers is a political one. And that's driven, again, by the politics of the marginal swings in 416, 905, 604.
The Conservatives have called for the temporary foreign worker program outside of agriculture to be abolished.
Yeah.
Would that be a good move or a bad move?
Well, I've had some discussions expressing some minor opposition to that because, okay, in principle, it sounds good. In practice, Canada has signed international agreements, free trade agreements, to facilitate the importation of foreign labor, not necessarily at the entry level, though, at the higher ups, the engineers, IT specialists, intra-company transferees, managers, and the like, specialized knowledge people. We need them, but we can slam down using something very simple. If your hourly wage is under $30 an hour, you're not coming here on one of those things.
April 2022, the Trudeau Liberals announced a policy change. And I can't remember if this was Mark Miller or Sean Fraser at the time. I think it was likely Fraser. They announced a policy change on temporary foreign workers, and they took the guardrails off. This is as we're coming out of year 2
COVID,
of the pandemic. And CERB is still being given out. And so young people, I guess, aren't going out for those entry-level jobs. And I guess some people are still concerned about leaving their home. And so there used to be guardrails such as if unemployment in your region is above 6%, you cannot get a labor market impact assessment to get a temporary foreign worker. They got rid of that. They went from 10% of your labor force can be temporary foreign workers to 20%. But if you're in hospitality and some other things where there's a lot of entry-level labor, you could have as much as 30% of your labor force. Those are just the types of policy decisions that put a program like that on steroids, is it not?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there was no public discussion, no consultation with external stakeholders on the impact of this. Instead, what they could do is say, oh, you want a study permit? Okay, we're only giving those out to people who can afford to study in Canada without working. That's the type of thinking.
So it was later that year, I think it was November 2022, that they said, we're going to get rid of the restrictions on temporary students working. And
Bingo.
And then suddenly we had a youth unemployment crisis.
Bingo. And so what's going on? I didn't understand it. I couldn't trace it through the paper trail of bureaucracy using access to information, but it all seemed to flow from just one seat. It's Justinville. Yeah.
Okay, before we get into the issue of judges and giving out lighter sentences, I do want to ask you about marriages of convenience, because you recently uncovered more on that. I remember writing about a group out of China that would offer you a full wedding package, and they were caught because you'd go to this company, this group of people, and I don't know what you would pay them back then. This would be about 2012, 13. I was writing about this. But they would provide you with the wedding photos and the fake family to be with you in the wedding photos. And they only got caught because a bureaucrat noticed that the same red velvet suitcase was in the back of all the photos. And that brought down this attempt at marriage of convenience. But you're saying now that there are also marriages of convenience that people are arranging once they're in Canada on these study permits. And what is it, like $10,000 or more that people are paying for this?
It's 50 US. And there's no guidebook, but the telltale is you have young people living as a couple in an apartment. They may be in different rooms, they may be cohabiting, but they're certainly not in a spousal relationship.
It's not conjugal, let's say.
Yeah, not conjugal. That's a good way to do it. And then it's up to immigration to figure it out. 17% of the pool of students find their way into a spousal sponsorship. In the past, the marriage of convenience stats weren't horrible. They always existed. But now, with the pressure on the people who were part of that 2 million and I Want to Stay group, the pressure to engage in marriage of convenience is there. And how are they going to afford to come up with that money? And it's a good deal unless you're caught, and it's illegal. The other spouse gets their university education paid for. And then the foreign national ends up with permanent resident status. The day you get accepted, you're allowed to leave, and pretty much no questions asked. You had an argument, things were said.
Marriage.
Yep.
Okay, so I had a friend I used to work with who met his wife while she was a foreign student at U of T. They got married. They were put through the ringer for her to be able to stay. Are they still doing that? Or is it like the refugee thing? Don't ask too many questions. They had to prove, outside of doing the conjugal act in front of the immigration officer, they had to prove that this was real and legit.
Yeah. And the limit is the number of cases that the officer can do in a year. Because carefully controlled. So you're only given a finite number of cases in a year. And if the pool of MOCs, marriages of convenience, exceeds that limit, hello, you got a problem.
We had the audit report a little while ago about the number of people who were, lying to get into the country, and we could only, examine 2,000 a year.
Yeah.
I mean,
Same system.
I mean, this is not working. Jason Kenney, when he was immigration minister, I hate to keep going back to him, but he seemed to have a handle on the system. He would tell you that the greatest source of finding out information about people trying to game the system, about the frauds, about the marriages of convenience, this red suitcase mafia, all of this, the best source was he would go around to visit different immigrant communities, and they'd always pull him aside. Mr. Jason, I have to tell you about this. The immigrant community wanted to root out the fraudsters. I don't think that if Lena Diab, our current minister, went to an event like that and was told all of these things, that she would do anything. She does not appear to be competent enough to fix all the problems that you and I have spent the last 45 minutes discussing.
She's no Eleanor Kaplan, for sure. And that is a hole in the submarine, as far as I'm concerned, for the Canadian immigration system. Her testimony before parliamentary committees demonstrates an astounding lack of knowledge of the Canadian immigration system. To the point where even on the floor of the House of Commons in question period, other people stand up to answer in her place. I have $20 riding on she's out in the next cabinet shuffle, but we're going to wait and see how that plays out. If it's weak at the top, it percolates down, and you end up with more abuse, more problems, more expensive problems to solve.
Yeah, people like to discount the role of politicians, but if a cabinet minister doesn't have a good handle on their department, things fall apart. Okay, let's talk about judges giving lighter sentences to people so that they don't get deported. This started in 2013. It was a Supreme Court decision called FAM. And my understanding of that decision, Richard, and you're the lawyer, I'm not, I don't even play one on TV. My reading of that decision was you could take immigration status into account, but it was basically saying you should not be giving people a harsher sentence because of their immigration status, nor should you be giving them a lighter one if they have a serious crime. And I've spoken to different judges about this who are mortified that they said, actually, the original decision wasn't bad, but the application of it since has been horrific. And so a man in Calgary sexually assaulting a woman in a bar, given a lower sentence so that he is not removed. A man in New Brunswick under a no contact restraining order, given his sentence reduced to a discharge so that he's not deported from Canada. The recent one just this week, National Post had it, a woman, not even a permanent resident, temporary worker in Canada, stealing thousands of dollars from the Walmart. Well, we wouldn't want to see her deported as she's stealing from the Walmart she's working in. National Post has done incredible work on this. They, of course, have been protested by various lawyers groups saying you're bringing the system of justice into disrepute. I would argue these decisions might be doing that. Is this the justice system bending over backwards, bastardizing what the law actually says in ways that will not only hurt the country, but again, undermine faith and support in the immigration system?
And that's key. And as well, our judicial system. So it seems to me that it may be a question of training on sentencing guidelines. It's like a toothpaste tube. You're going to squeeze it, stuff's going to come up the top. So if you're going to say, on the one hand, take into account the immigration situation, it should not stop there. What you do is you can balance a lesser sentence based on the immigration consequences, but you double or triple the other penalties. So volunteer work,
Probation.
probation, or other things like that. So you don't end up scot-free or with a lesser penalty because of your immigration status. You should still pay premium, but just not with the thing that's going to nail your immigration status. Make it hurt, make it painful in other sentencing tactics to make up for what you're not doing because of the immigration thing.
It feels like two-tier justice. It stinks to high heaven. You know, my cousin, who never took out didn't become a citizen, could get a lighter sentence so they don't get deported, and I'd get a stiffer sentence. That seems wrong.
Yeah, well, I don't think the court system is designed to provide that compassionate humanitarian relief tied to an immigration issue. That's the job of the immigration department. The guy's been living here 20 years, who's got 3 kids, or whatever the reasons are. That's an immigration decision. It shouldn't go to a sentencing judge because they're not trained to engage in that type of analysis. That's for the immigration department. Instead, the judge can be given guidelines saying, all right, if you're going light because of this immigration thing, go heavy on the other penalty tools we got in the toolbox.
Richard Kurland, we have not solved all the immigration problems in the country yet, but we've had a good chat about them, and I hope people have been educated. So thank you so much for your time today.
It's an honor and a pleasure dealing with an experienced veteran of journalism who has contributed to the fabric of Canadian democracy for decades.
Now you're buttering me up.
Well,
thanks so much, Richard.
You're welcome.
Full Comment is a post-media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Proulx. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Thanks for listening. Make sure that you share this on social media. Hit that subscribe button and tell your friends about us. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
There were so many missed opportunities to catch this before the devastating thing happened.
A third of them we found literally in the phone book. These people were not afraid. They knew that nobody was effectively hunting them. They knew they had escaped justice, that they were going to die in their beds.
When I give talks at law schools, is that the charter ultimately is empowering a minority, and it's empowering a minority that's a guild across the country. And it's a fairly elite guild, and the guild is lawyers.
Families who were split by referendum, and brothers and sisters who never talked to each other for years after the referendum because they were so angry at each other because of emotions on both sides.
The reason he was assassinated was not because he was trying to put a satellite into space, but because the gun that he was creating had other applications that made him and the gun very dangerous.
It's finally here. A new season of Canada Did What? Host media podcast that revisits the big Canadian political events you might think you remember and tells you the real story you never knew. I'm Tristan Hopper. The voices you just heard are from our brand new Season 2. We will unpack some of the pivotal moments that helped define our country, often without a vote, usually without a plan, and sometimes without anyone admitting what they'd done. We'll find out how Canada became a welcoming paradise for untold numbers of Nazi war criminals after the Second World War. We let them build monuments to their wartime exploits and even ended up honoring a Nazi fighter in the House of Commons. And I'm sorry to say that none of that happened by accident. We'll bring you the little-known story of a troubled Canadian rocket scientist who turned to a sinister life of selling giant guns to terrible people. And if that sounds like a spy novel, it ends like one too. You'll hear the behind-the-scenes story of Quebec's attempted secession from Canada and how very close we came to a political crisis that would have made Brexit look like a picnic. You'll hear about how the much-celebrated Charter of Rights and Freedoms turned into something its creators never wanted, and how many of the most extravagant warnings about the document were all quickly proven true. And you'll even hear about how authorities bungled multiple chances to stop the deadliest terrorist attack in our country's history and then proceeded to pretend it never happened. These aren't dusty history lessons. They're stories about power, ambition, madness, and the things about Canada that a lot of people would rather ignore. But not you. You won't want to miss an episode. Subscribe to make sure you get all of Season 2 starting March 2026 anywhere you get your podcasts.